My name is Ethan Carter. I've been married to my wife, Rachel, for 7 years. On the surface, we had it all: a beautiful home in the suburbs of Denver, successful careers, and a bond that people envied. I work as a software engineer, while Rachel owns a boutique that's booming thanks to her incredible charm and business acumen. But lately, things had begun to feel off. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Life can get overwhelming when you're juggling work, social commitments, and family. But the cracks became harder to ignore. Rachel, once vibrant and attentive, had grown distant. She started taking more girls' nights out, and going on sudden, unexplained errands. Her phone was now practically glued to her hand, and she got jumpy whenever I came too close to it. That wasn't like her. I wanted to trust her, needed to, but doubt crept in like a shadow I couldn't shake. One evening I came home early from work. Rachel wasn't in the house, but her car was parked in the driveway. Thinking she might be upstairs, I went to our bedroom, only to find the door slightly ajar. Inside, I caught a glimpse of something that made my chest tighten: a box of condoms peeking out of her nightstand drawer. We haven't used those in years. Not since deciding that birth control wasn't necessary anymore. A sick feeling twisted my gut. Still, I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she had forgotten about them, or maybe they were from years ago and I was overthinking. But then there was her brother-in-law, Jason. Jason, my younger brother, was the charming, fun-loving one in the family. He'd always been a bit of a flirt, but I'd never thought much of it. We all laughed off his harmless teasing, his winks, and the way he lingered a little too long when hugging Rachel. But now, in light of everything, those moments replayed in my head, casting a darker light on their interactions. One evening, while Rachel was out getting groceries, I saw Jason's car parked a few blocks away, near a secluded park. It seemed strange. He lived miles away. Something about it gnawed at me, though I told myself it was nothing. I drove past slowly, peering through the windows, but the car was empty. That night, Rachel came home later than usual, carrying a single small bag of groceries, just milk and eggs. Her excuse? The lines at the store were ridiculous. But something didn't add up. The unease in my chest grew heavier. I started keeping a closer eye on things: Rachel's comings and goings, her phone habits, even the way she looked at Jason during family dinners. The pieces weren't coming together yet, but the seed of suspicion was firmly planted. The days that followed were some of the most agonizing of my life. The small cracks in our life together were widening, and I couldn't stop myself from peering into them, even though I feared what I might find. Rachel's excuses became more frequent, more flimsy. Errands that should have taken 20 minutes stretched into hours. She'd always been someone who loved dressing up, but lately, she'd been putting extra effort into her appearance, even for simple outings like picking up dry cleaning or going to the bank. Then there was Jason. He started showing up unannounced at our house, always with a carefree grin and some excuse that felt rehearsed. Just thought I'd swing by and say hi. Or, I was in the neighborhood. It didn't help that Rachel seemed a little too thrilled every time he dropped in. The way they laughed at each other's jokes, their lingering glances, it began to gnaw at me. Still, I didn't want to leap to conclusions. Maybe I was being paranoid, letting insecurities cloud my judgment. I told myself, this is your wife. You've built a life together. Rachel wouldn't do this to you. But the nagging doubt wouldn't let up. One Saturday evening, Rachel claimed she was going to a friend's house to plan some charity event. Her face lit up when Jason walked into the room, and I couldn't help but notice the way her eyes darted nervously between us as she explained her plans. Don't wait up, she said breezily, kissing me on the cheek. Her scent lingered, a mix of jasmine and something I couldn't place. Jason lingered too, leaning casually against the kitchen counter. You doing anything tonight, bro? He asked, his tone a little too nonchalant. I shook my head. Just catching the game. Why? Just thought maybe we could grab a beer sometime soon, you know? Catch up. Been too long. I stared at him for a moment, trying to read his expression. Was he nervous? Guilty? Or was I imagining things? Sure, I said. Let me know when. After Rachel left, I decided to do something I'd never done before, follow her. It felt wrong, like I was betraying her trust, but the unease in my gut told me I had to know the truth. I gave her a few minutes head start, then grabbed my keys and slipped out the door. I kept my headlights off as I trailed her car through the neighborhood. It was tricky. She drove erratically, as if she were deliberately trying to lose anyone who might be following her. But eventually, she pulled into a small parking lot near a dimly lit cafe on the edge of town. I parked a safe distance away, heart pounding as I watched her get out of the car. She wasn't dressed for a casual meeting with a friend. Her heels clicked sharply on the pavement, her black dress hugging her figure. I couldn't help but notice how much effort she'd put into her appearance. And then I saw him. Jason stepped out of his truck and greeted her with a grin that made my stomach churn. They didn't hug or kiss, not here, not where anyone could see, but there was an intimacy in the way they stood together, leaning in close to talk. They disappeared into the cafe. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide what to do. Storm in and confront them? Wait and watch? Or drive home and pretend I hadn't seen anything? My heart told me to act, but my brain told me to wait. I needed proof, something concrete. Otherwise, Rachel would just twist the situation, make me seem crazy for suspecting her. I waited for an hour, watching as the cafe emptied out. Finally, Rachel and Jason emerged, walking side by side, their heads close together. They stopped near her car, their conversation stretching on. Jason touched her arm lightly, too lightly to seem casual. When she finally drove off, Jason stayed behind, lighting a cigarette and leaning against his truck. He didn't seem in any rush to leave. I followed Rachel home, careful to stay far enough back that she wouldn't notice. When I pulled into the driveway minutes after her, she was already inside, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. "Hey, babe," she called from the kitchen. "Did you eat dinner yet? I brought you some leftovers from the cafe." I stared at her, searching her face for any hint of guilt or deception. But she looked calm, serene even. "No, I'm good," I muttered, brushing past her and heading upstairs. In our bedroom, I opened her closet, flipping through her clothes until I found the black dress she'd been wearing. My hands trembled as I inspected it, searching for any telltale signs, anything to confirm what my gut already knew. That's when I noticed the faint scent of cologne on the fabric. It wasn't mine. The scent of cologne on Rachel's dress confirmed what I'd been dreading. Something was going on between her and Jason. But suspicion wasn't enough. I needed undeniable proof. That night, I lay awake beside her, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with questions. How long had this been going on? How deep was their betrayal? And most painfully, why? By morning, I had a plan. Rachel left early, claiming she needed to open the boutique. Her alibi checked out, but I still felt uneasy. After she drove off, I got to work. I installed a small GPS tracker under her car, hidden where she wouldn't notice. Technology was on my side. I could monitor her movements from an app on my phone. Next, I turned my attention to our home. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I needed answers. In the living room, I hid a tiny camera on a bookshelf, angled to capture the entire room. Upstairs, I placed another one discreetly in our bedroom. If Jason was coming here while I was at work, I'd know. By the time I finished, I felt equal parts guilty and resolute. If I was wrong, I'd owe Rachel a massive apology. But if I was right, I didn't let myself finish that thought. The first day of surveillance passed uneventfully. Rachel came home late, claiming the boutique had been busy. I checked the footage from the living room and bedroom cameras, nothing unusual. She spent the evening on the couch, scrolling through her phone, occasionally laughing at whatever she was looking at. But the GPS tracker told a different story. The app showed that earlier in the afternoon, Rachel's car had stopped at a secluded motel just outside town. She was there for almost 2 hours. When I asked her how her day had gone, she didn't mention it. My stomach twisted as I stared at the screen, replaying her movements in my head. What was she doing there? Was Jason with her? I needed more. The next day, I made an excuse to leave work early, telling my boss I wasn't feeling well. I parked down the street from our house and waited, hidden in my car, hoping for some clarity. At 2:37 p.m., Jason's truck pulled into our driveway. My hands clenched the steering wheel so hard it hurt. He got out, glanced around, and walked up to the front door like he owned the place. Seconds later, Rachel opened the door, greeting him with a smile that made me sick. They disappeared inside. I didn't want to confront them, not yet. I needed to see this through, no matter how much it hurt. So I waited. And waited. They stayed inside for over an hour. When Jason finally left, he was smiling, his shirt untucked, and his hair slightly disheveled. Rachel stood at the door, watching him drive off. The way she leaned against the frame, her lips curving into a smirk, told me everything I needed to know. When she came upstairs that evening, I pretended everything was fine. She kissed me on the cheek, the same way she always did, and asked how my day had been. Uneventful, I said, lying through my teeth. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I downloaded the footage from the living room camera. My chest tightened as I watched Jason step into the house and pull Rachel into a deep embrace. They kissed, their bodies pressed together like they couldn't get close enough. I slammed my laptop shut, bile rising in my throat. It was undeniable now. My wife and my brother were having an affair, right under my nose. But I wasn't ready to confront them, not yet. I wanted more than just proof, I wanted revenge. The footage replayed in my mind on a loop. Rachel and Jason, their stolen moments in my home, my sanctuary. I spent the next few days oscillating between rage, heartbreak, and the cold determination to make them pay for what they'd done. But I wasn't impulsive. I knew this wasn't the time to confront them. I needed to be patient and precise. Rachel's routine didn't change. She kept smiling at me, chatting about her day, and occasionally pulling me into bed as if nothing was wrong. It disgusted me how easily she could wear the mask of a loving wife while stabbing me in the back. I played along, nodding at the right times, laughing when I had to, though every smile felt like a crack splitting my soul. I began gathering more evidence. Every time Rachel left the house, I tracked her movements on the GPS app. Almost every week, there was a stop at the same motel on the outskirts of town. Her visits were brief, an hour, maybe two. Jason's truck often appeared on the GPS app near hers. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but I needed more than location data. I wanted undeniable proof, something they couldn't talk their way out of. I reached out to a private investigator, someone I'd found online with stellar reviews. His name was Dean, and from the moment we met in his dimly lit office, I could tell he was the right guy for the job. "So, your wife and your brother," Dean said, leaning back in his chair after I told him everything. His tone was professional, but there was a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. "That's right," I said through gritted teeth. Dean nodded slowly. "Well, this is messy, but it's not the first time I've dealt with something like this. You want pictures, videos? Maybe audio?" "All of it," I said. "I want their lies exposed for what they are. No room for denials." Dean promised to keep a close watch on Rachel and Jason, particularly during her errands and trips to the motel. I handed him a check for his retainer fee and left his office feeling a strange mix of dread and relief. The next week, Dean delivered. He emailed me a folder filled with high-resolution photos and videos. The first image I opened showed Rachel and Jason leaving the motel, their arms wrapped around each other. Another image showed them kissing in the parking lot, oblivious to the world around them. Then there was the video. It wasn't graphic, but it didn't need to be. The two of them sitting in a parked car, Rachel leaning across the console to kiss him, her fingers trailing down his chest. I couldn't bring myself to watch more. Instead, I forwarded the folder to my lawyer, Sandra, with a simple message. "This is what I'm dealing with. I need advice." Sandra called me within the hour. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I can't imagine how hard this is for you, but you need to keep your emotions in check. If you want to go through with the divorce, this evidence will be invaluable. But you also need to think about what you want long term. Do you want the house? Are you ready to fight for a fair settlement? I sighed. I don't even know what I want right now. I just need to stop feeling like a fool. Well, here's my advice, she said. Gather everything: financial records, texts, emails. Anything that proves their affair or paints them in a bad light. And whatever you do, don't let on that you know. Keep playing the devoted husband. The element of surprise will work in your favor. Her words hit home. I couldn't let them see this coming. The next step in my plan was to set up a trap. I began planting seeds of suspicion, dropping hints to Rachel that I'd be working late or traveling for work. There's a big project coming up, I told her one morning over coffee. I might need to stay overnight in Boulder for a couple of days. She barely looked up from her phone, muttering, "Okay, just let me know." The lack of interest in my schedule confirmed it. She saw this as another opportunity to sneak around with Jason. On the day of my supposed trip, I packed an overnight bag and left the house, pretending to head for Boulder. But I didn't go far. Instead, I parked my car down the street and waited, my phone buzzing with updates from Dean. Sure enough, within an hour, Jason's truck pulled into my driveway. I stayed calm, my breathing steady as I watched from a distance. Dean, stationed nearby, sent me live updates. "They're in the living room," he texted. "Looks like they're getting comfortable." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. "They're heading upstairs now." That was all I needed to hear. Sitting in my car down the street, I felt a storm brewing inside me. The text from Dean confirmed what I already knew. Rachel and Jason were upstairs, in my bedroom, crossing a line that should never have been crossed. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment I dreaded. My heart raced, not with fear, but with fury. Years of trust and loyalty had led to this, and I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. Gripping the small duffel bag I'd packed earlier, I stepped out of my car and made my way toward the house. Each step felt heavier than the last, but there was no turning back now. I let myself in through the side door, moving silently through the kitchen. My heart pounded as I approached the stairs. From the bottom step, I could hear faint laughter and murmurs from the bedroom. It was infuriating how carefree they sounded, like teenagers sneaking around, oblivious to the consequences of their actions. I reached the top of the stairs and paused outside the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. What I saw through the crack made my blood boil. Jason and Rachel were tangled together on the bed, their movements slow and intimate, as if savoring their stolen moments. For a split second, I hesitated. A part of me wanted to storm in and rip them apart, but I knew I needed to keep my cool. This wasn't just about catching them. It was about ensuring they couldn't deny it later. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my phone and began recording. The video wasn't long, just enough to capture their betrayal, their disregard for me, and the sanctity of our marriage. Then, with my phone still in hand, I pushed the door open. "What the hell is this?" I barked. The look on their faces was priceless. Rachel scrambled to cover herself with the sheets, her eyes wide with panic. Jason froze, his mouth hanging open like a deer caught in headlights. "Ethan!" Rachel stammered. "I can explain." "Don't you dare!" I snapped, my voice cold and sharp. "Don't you dare insult me with some pathetic excuse." Jason, ever the coward, grabbed his clothes and started fumbling to get dressed. "Look, man, I didn't mean—" "Shut up," I said, my glare cutting through him. "You don't get to man me, Jason. Not after this." Rachel burst into tears, but her cries felt hollow, like the wailing of someone sorry only for being caught. "Ethan, please, let me explain." "Explain what, Rachel?" I said, holding up my phone. "That you brought my brother into my house, into my bed? That you've been sneaking around behind my back for God knows how long?" Her tears stopped abruptly, replaced by a flicker of defiance. "It's not what you think." I couldn't help but laugh, a bitter, humorless sound. "Not what I think? Really? Do you honestly believe I'm that stupid? Jason, now fully dressed, tried to sidestep me toward the door. I stepped in front of him, blocking his way. Where do you think you're going? I said, my voice low and menacing. You're not walking out of here like nothing happened. You owe me an explanation. He looked anywhere but at me, his face pale. Ethan, I'm sorry, man. I messed up. Damn right you did, I said, my fists clenching. You're my brother, Jason. My blood. And you thought it was okay to betray me like this? Rachel, still clutching the sheets, chimed in. It wasn't planned, Ethan. It just happened. I turned to her, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, it just happened? Well, that makes it all better, doesn't it? Jason took advantage of my distraction to slip past me, muttering. I should go. You should, I said, stepping aside. And don't think for a second this is over. He bolted down the stairs, leaving Rachel and me alone in the wreckage of our marriage. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The silence was deafening, filled with the weight of everything that had just unraveled. Finally, Rachel whispered, Ethan, I'm so sorry. Please, we can work through this. I love you. I stared at her, feeling nothing but contempt. You don't love me, Rachel. You love the thrill, the secrecy, the lies. But me? I was just the guy who made it easy for you to live this double life. She sobbed, clutching the sheets tighter. Please, Ethan. Don't throw everything away. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but we can fix this. I shook my head, my decision already made. You threw everything away, Rachel. The moment you decided to let him into our bed, into my life, you made your choice. Now I'm making mine. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room. Walking out of the bedroom felt like stepping out of a war zone, leaving behind the smoldering wreckage of my marriage. My mind was racing, my pulse pounding as I made my way downstairs. Jason was long gone. He didn't even have the guts to face me properly. I stopped in the kitchen, leaning against the counter to catch my breath. The house, once filled with memories of laughter and love, now felt like a prison. Every corner seemed tainted by their betrayal. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my emotions in check, but the rage and heartbreak refused to subside. Rachel was still upstairs. I could hear her muffled sobs through the floorboards. Part of me wanted to go back up, to scream at her, to make her feel the same pain I was drowning in. But what was the point? The damage was done. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called Dean. It's done, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. You caught them? Dean asked. Red-handed, I replied. I've got footage and photos. Everything you need. There was a pause on the other end. Ethan, I know this isn't what you want to hear right now, but you should probably think about next steps. Divorce, property, finances. You need to protect yourself. I know, I muttered. Thanks, Dean. I'll be in touch. The next few days were a blur. I stayed at a hotel, avoiding Rachel entirely. My lawyer, Sandra, worked quickly, filing the paperwork and preparing the evidence for the inevitable legal battle. She advised me to stay calm, to avoid any confrontations that could be used against me in court. Remember, Ethan, she said during one of our meetings, the calmer you are, the better your case will look. Let her emotions work against her. It was good advice, but it wasn't easy to follow. Rachel called me dozens of times, leaving voicemail after voicemail. At first, they were tearful apologies, begging me to come home, to talk things through. Then, when I didn't respond, the tone shifted. You're being childish, Ethan, she said in one message. You're just going to throw away everything we've built together? Over one mistake? Grow up. Her audacity was almost laughable. Jason, on the other hand, was a ghost. Not a single call, text, or message. My own brother, someone I'd trusted my entire life, didn't even have the decency to face me. The real fallout came when our families found out. I didn't tell them, I didn't need to. Rachel's panicked calls to her parents, combined with Jason's sudden disappearance from family events, raised enough red flags. Within days, the whispers started. My mother called me, her voice heavy with worry. Ethan, what's going on? I heard something about Rachel and Jason. Please tell me it's not true. I hesitated, not wanting to drag my parents into the mess, but the truth was already out there. It's true, Mom. Rachel and Jason. They've been having an affair. Her sharp intake of breath was followed by silence. Then, softly, Oh, Ethan. I'm so sorry. I'll be fine, I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Your father's going to lose his mind when he hears about this, she murmured. And Jason? What was he thinking? How could he do this to you? I don't know, Mom, I replied. But I'm done trying to figure it out. Family gatherings became tense and awkward. My father, a stern man who valued loyalty above all else, refused to even speak Jason's name. He's no son of mine, he said during one dinner, his voice thick with anger. Jason's absence didn't go unnoticed, and neither did Rachel's. People asked questions, but I kept my answers vague. I didn't want to air my dirty laundry in public, even though part of me wanted everyone to know the truth. Meanwhile, Rachel made one last desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our relationship. She showed up at my office unannounced, her eyes puffy and red from crying. Ethan, please, she said, standing in the doorway of my office. We need to talk. There's nothing left to talk about, Rachel, I replied coldly. Yes, there is, she insisted, stepping inside. You don't understand, this wasn't about you. It was about me. I felt lost. I needed something, and Jason. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to justify this. She flinched but pressed on. I made a mistake, Ethan. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. I'll go to therapy. We can go to therapy together. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I stared at her, the woman I once loved more than anything. She looked so broken, so desperate, but I couldn't muster any sympathy. It's too late, Rachel, I said quietly. You didn't just break my heart, you destroyed our family. There's no coming back from this. Her tears started again, but I didn't care. I walked out, leaving her standing there, alone and defeated. I avoided Jason for as long as I could. But one evening, about 2 weeks after catching them, he finally decided to show his face. He called me out of the blue, his name flashing on my phone like a warning light. At first, I ignored it. But when he called a second time, then a third, I finally picked up. What do you want, Jason? I asked, my voice icy. Ethan, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, he began. But we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. Please, just give me a chance to explain, he pleaded. His tone grated on me, but curiosity got the better of me. Fine. Tomorrow. My place. Don't be late. The next evening, Jason showed up at my door. He looked terrible, his usually confident swagger replaced with nervous energy. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven. He looked like a man who'd been sleeping in his truck, which, knowing him, wasn't far from the truth. Come in, I said curtly, stepping aside. He shuffled in, avoiding my eyes. We sat at the dining table, the same one where we'd shared countless beers and laughs. Now it felt like a battleground. Say what you need to say, I said, leaning back in my chair, arms crossed. Jason fidgeted, his hands clenching and unclenching as he searched for the right words. I messed up, Ethan. Big time. I don't even know how it happened. 1 minute we were just talking, and the next... He trailed off, unable to meet my gaze. I let out a bitter laugh. You don't know how it happened? Let me spell it out for you. You betrayed your brother. You slept with my wife. You wrecked my marriage. That about cover it? He winced but didn't deny it. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he said, his voice trembling. I swear, Ethan, I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, I snapped. And the worst part? You didn't even have the decency to come clean. If I hadn't caught you, how long were you planning to keep this going? He didn't answer. That's what I thought, I said, my voice hard. I don't know what to say, Jason mumbled. Say you're sorry, I said. Not that it'll change anything, but at least have the guts to own up to what you did. I am sorry, he said, finally looking me in the eye. For everything. I studied him for a moment, trying to gauge whether his apology was sincere or just an attempt to ease his guilt. What do you want from me, Jason? I asked. Forgiveness? Redemption? Because you're not getting either. He slumped in his chair, his face a mask of regret. I don't know. I just didn't want to lose you as my brother. I shook my head. You already did. The fallout from Jason's betrayal didn't end there. News of his affair with Rachel spread through our family like wildfire. My parents were devastated, especially my father, who'd always seen Jason as the golden child. Do you even understand what you've done? My dad thundered at a family gathering, his face red with fury. You didn't just betray Ethan, you betrayed all of us. Jason stood there, head bowed, as our father berated him. Our mother, normally the peacekeeper, sat silently, tears streaming down her face. I don't care if you're my son, Dad continued. You're not welcome in my house until you've made this right. Jason didn't argue. He simply nodded and walked out, the weight of his shame visible in every step. Rachel, meanwhile, had begun to unravel. She stopped showing up at the boutique, claiming she was too stressed to work. Her friends began distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. She called me constantly, leaving tearful voicemails that ranged from apologetic to downright accusatory. You're ruining my life, Ethan! She screamed in one message. Why couldn't you just let this go? Let it go. The audacity of her words made me laugh bitterly. One evening, I got a call from my mother. You need to know something, Ethan, she said hesitantly. Jason's been struggling. He's not doing well. He's staying with a friend right now, but he's drinking heavily. I'm worried about him. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Mom, I can't be the one to fix him. Not after what he did. I know, she said softly. But he's still your brother. No, Mom, I said firmly. Not anymore. The weight of everything, Rachel's betrayal, Jason's downfall, the shattered trust in my family, pressed down on me like a boulder. Some nights, I found myself staring at old photos of happier times, wondering how we'd gotten to this point. But no matter how much I analyzed it, the conclusion was always the same: they'd made their choices. Now they had to live with the consequences. Months passed, and though the wounds hadn't healed, I felt stronger. Divorce proceedings moved forward swiftly, thanks to the ironclad evidence I'd collected. Rachel tried to negotiate, pleading for leniency, but I left everything in my lawyer's capable hands. The settlement was brutal for her. I kept the house, my savings, and the bulk of our assets. Rachel, with her reputation tarnished and business suffering, walked away with far less than she'd hoped. Sandra, my lawyer, made sure the prenup was honored to the letter. But it wasn't just about the material things. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my sense of self. The confrontation I dreaded most came one afternoon when Rachel showed up at the house unannounced. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and the sight of her on the porch, clutching an envelope, filled me with a strange mix of anger and pity. Ethan, can we talk? She asked, her voice soft. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. Make it quick. I wanted to give you this, she said, holding out the envelope. Inside were handwritten pages, her attempt at an apology, an explanation. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. But I need you to know how sorry I am. For everything. Her voice cracked as she continued. I ruined the best thing that ever happened to me. I took your love for granted, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. I listened, but the words felt hollow. Too much had been broken, too many lines crossed. Rachel, I said finally, I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for. But we're done. There's no coming back from this. Her sobs grew louder as she realized the finality of my words. "Ethan, please!" But I'd already turned to go inside, shutting the door on her and the life we once shared. Jason's fall from grace continued. My father cut him out of the family business, and with no steady income, he bounced between friends' couches. He sent me a text once, just one. "I'm sorry, bro. I miss you." I didn't reply. In the months that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I focused on my work, my health, and my friends, people who stood by me when my world came crashing down. Slowly, I began to find pieces of myself that I thought I'd lost. One Saturday, I decided to clear out the last remnants of Rachel from the house. As I boxed up old photos and trinkets, I came across a picture of Jason and me from years ago. We were standing by the lake, arms slung over each other's shoulders, smiling like idiots. I stared at it for a long time before tossing it into the trash. The closure I didn't expect came a few weeks later when I ran into Rachel at a grocery store. She looked thinner, older, like someone who'd been carrying the weight of her mistakes. She saw me and hesitated, then offered a weak smile. "Hi, Ethan." "Rachel," I said with a nod. For a moment, we just stood there, the silence heavy with everything unsaid. Finally, she broke it. "I'm moving," she said. "To Arizona. I need a fresh start." I nodded again, unsure of what to say. "I hope it works out for you." She blinked, surprised by my calmness. "Thank you." And with that, she walked away, disappearing down the aisle. That night, I sat on the back porch with a cold beer, staring at the stars. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. The anger and pain weren't gone, but they didn't consume me anymore. I'd survived. In the end, Rachel and Jason were just chapters in my story, dark ones, yes, but not the whole book. My life wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. And this time, it was mine to write.